Okay, so when I say the word Romania, what's the very first thing that pops into your head? For a lot of us, it's probably one specific image, right? Yeah, exactly. You're picturing misty mountains, these ancient, spooky castles, and maybe, just maybe, some legends written in blood. It's that classic Gothic horror vibe, you know? Vampires hiding in the shadows of some old fortress. It's a scene ripped straight from a Hollywood movie. But here's the twist. What if the real story, the actual history of Romania, is, well, even more terrifying and way more fascinating than any vampire tale? That's what we're going to do. We're going to peel back the layers of myth and find out what's really going on. So to really get a grip on the whole Dracula legend, we've got to go back. We need to understand the world that created him in the first place. And I mean way back. Let's rewind the clock long before any talk of vampires to see where this all began. So, before Romania was even a thing, this land belonged to the Dacians, and let me tell you, these guys were some seriously fierce warriors who did not want the Romans on their turf. But, well, this is the Roman Empire we're talking about. So by the 2nd century AD, they conquered the region, and boom, they created a brand new province called Dacia.
Okay, and this is where things get really wild. Think about the legacy of that Roman conquest. If you look at a map today, Romania is totally surrounded by countries that speak Slavic languages. You've got Bulgaria, Serbia, Ukraine, all around it. And yet, Romanian is a Romance language, based on Latin. It's like this little linguistic island, a living, breathing echo of ancient Rome, stuck right in the middle of Eastern Europe. How cool is that?
I mean, seriously, just think about that. It's the only one in the entire region. A little piece of the Roman Empire that just held on for centuries. It really sets the stage for how unique this place is.
All right, so we've set the stage. Now, it's time to meet the man behind the monster.
This is Vlad III. Back in the 15th century, he was the ruler, or prince, of a region called Wallachia. But nobody calls him that. History knows him by a much more chilling name, Vlad the Impaler. And trust me, he earned that nickname.
You have to understand, Vlad was ruling in an insane time. He was literally caught in a vice grip between the massive Ottoman Empire on one side and the Kingdom of Hungary on the other. For him, survival meant total control. And how did he get that? Through absolute bone-chilling terror. See, he didn't just beat his enemies in a fight. No, he made horrifying public spectacles of them. For Vlad, fear wasn't just a byproduct of his rule, it was the main tool in his toolbox. It was the whole point.
And this story, this one really gets to the core of his legend. Just try to picture this for a second. You're part of the invading Ottoman army, one of the most feared fighting forces on the planet at the time. You march into Wallachia, and instead of an army, you find a forest. A forest of thousands of your own captured soldiers, all impaled on giant stakes. The stories say the psychological shock was so massive, the army literally turned around and went home. Now that is the power of terror.
Okay, so what about the famous Dracula's castle? You've seen the pictures, right? Well, sorry to burst your bubble, but this is one of the biggest myths out there. Bran Castle is an amazing tourist spot, but the real Vlad the Impaler? He had almost nothing to do with it. Best guess from historians is that he might have been a prisoner there for, like, a few nights. That's it. It's a classic case of the legend totally overshadowing the reality. But look, Vlad's incredible story is really just one piece of a much bigger, much more complicated puzzle. For hundreds of years, the land we now call Romania was basically just a collection of small territories, constantly squeezed between giant, hungry empires. The name of the game was just survive. I mean, for centuries, this place was a constant battleground. You had the Ottomans, the Hungarians, the Russians all fighting over it. Survival wasn't just a goal, it was an art form. It actually took until the 1800s for the main regions, Wallachia, Moldavia, and Transylvania, to finally come together and form the country of Romania. But the fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. Fast forward to World War II, and Romania is in another impossible position, stuck between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. Talk about being between a rock and a hard place. They made a tough call and sided with Germany at first, but then as the war started to shift, they did a complete 180 and switched to the Allied side in 1944. A total survival move.
So the war ends, but for Romania, it just meant trading one kind of nightmare for another. They ended up behind the Iron Curtain, under Soviet influence. And this brings us to one of the absolute darkest periods in their recent history, the era of the communist dictator Nicolae Ceausescu. Life under this guy, it was a complete nightmare. You had his secret police who were literally everywhere. Nobody trusted anybody. It was a culture of total paranoia. Meanwhile, the state propaganda machine was running 24/7, telling everyone what a genius Ceausescu was. And the people, they were starving. They were freezing in their homes, all because of his brutal policies. And where was all the country's money going? Into these insane, monumental building projects for his own glory. And this right here, is the ultimate symbol of his madness, the Parliament Palace. This thing is one of the biggest, heaviest, and most ridiculously expensive buildings on the entire planet. It's a monument to one man's ego, built entirely on the backs of a suffering nation. It's just staggering.
But then came December 1989, and the Romanian people decided they had finally had enough. It wasn't a slow protest. It was a sudden, violent revolution that just exploded across the country. Ceausescu and his wife tried to escape, but they were caught. They were given a super-fast show trial and they were executed on Christmas Day. A brutal, shocking end to an incredibly brutal regime.
So the dictator's gone, communism falls, and it's a new beginning, right? Well, yes and no. A history like this intense, it doesn't just vanish. It leaves ghosts. And it absolutely haunts the present, shaping the Romania that we see today.
So what is Romania today? Well, it's a modern country, a member of the EU, definitely looking to the future. But it also doesn't run from its past. In fact, it kind of embraces it. All those medieval castles, they're huge tourist attractions. It's even become a hotspot for what they call dark tourism, where people come specifically to learn about the history of Vlad the Impaler and the Ceausescu years. It's this fascinating place where the legend and the brutal truth are just woven together everywhere you look.
So, when you boil it all down, Romania is so much more than just the land of Dracula. It's a nation that was literally forged in the fire between empires. It's a place where survival meant being ruthless, where fear was a weapon. And the scars that history left behind, both the real history and the legends, they run way deeper and are honestly way more interesting than any vampire story could ever be.
And that really leaves us with one final big question to think about. When you look at Romania's story, from Vlad the Impaler all the way to Ceausescu, you see this pattern of brutal leaders and incredibly resilient people. It just makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much of any country's identity is built on the heroes they choose to remember versus how much is built on the monsters they manage to survive?